It's amazing the things you accumulate throughout a lifetime. You know, one look around my workshop right now and I see several different collections of stuff that have accumulated over the years. I've got a pile of leaf blowers on the shelf. I've got 4 wheelbarrows on the floor. I've got a stack of lumber I've accumulated. I've got a pile of hand tools I've accumulated. But one of the most interesting collections I've amassed over my lifetime is this one right here. Hard hats. Hard hats have played a significant role in my life, right since the time I was a teenager. I got into rock climbing when I was young, and I bought this hard hat here when I was 13 years old. My scout group was about to go on a climbing expedition. We were going to climb Mount Assiniboine in the Canadian Rockies. And we were super excited, but we needed head protection. So I put in hours. My scout leader owned Tippecanoe Chocolates, which was the company that produced many of the chocolate bars that scout groups would sell for fundraisers. And I went and I worked in his chocolate shop for, I don't even remember, a couple weekends. And with the money from that, I bought this hard hat at 13 years old. And it's been with me up several different mountains over the years. It's been with me through some interesting times, and it's a cool hard hat. It has a lot of fond memories attached to it. It has a lot of scary moments attached to it. It has a lot of sentimental value in my life. It's so interesting. But this particular hard hat has actually served a double purpose, because I used it for many years in mountaineering. But when I was 16 years old, in high school, I had just got into the Registered Apprenticeship Program, which is a program here in Canada where you can essentially go and work and earn hours towards an apprenticeship at the same time as earning high school credits, and you can get out of having to be in classes in favor of going to work, and it was perfect for me. And the job I was working at was working for a tree care company. I was working on my apprenticeship as a landscape horticulturist, and I was working for a tree care company climbing trees. Now, as a tree climber, you need head protection as well, and many tree climbers used rock climbing helmets. My partner that was teaching me was one of them. And this happened to be sitting in my garage. I didn't have a bunch of extra money, so I grabbed it, and this hard hat was on my head just about every single day for the first year and a half of my landscaping career. It's so fascinating how it goes back. These days it usually just sits around on a shelf, but I can't bear to get rid of it because it has so many memories. And it has so many stories that it can tell. After I was done pruning trees, I had made the decision, I went to school. And I went to school for my first year at Olds College doing my landscape horticulturist journeyman certificate. And while I was there, I was exposed to a whole world of the landscape industry that I didn't even know existed. You know, I had been solely focused on arboriculture and tree care up until that point, and I didn't know about the construction side of landscaping. I didn't know about property maintenance. I didn't know about all the other facets of the industry. But while I was in school, I was introduced to those, and I thought to myself, you know, if I'm going to get the most out of an apprenticeship, I should explore other parts of the industry while I'm still in school, while I'm still learning. You know, I was only in my first year of 4 years, so I had some time. I met a guy while I was in school, and I had applied for a job working for the company he worked for, doing some stuff I had never done before, landscape construction, heavier duty stuff. And while I was working for that company, I rose my way up through the ranks, and I became a lead hand and then a foreman. And one of the things about a foreman is generally you have to wear a white hard hat so people know who's in charge when they come to the site. And that was one of the things I had to do, so I got this hard hat. We also did some pretty major structural work, overhead pergolas, things like that. We would very often be craning large boulders around and things, so I needed head protection. And this one has the heavy duty foam insert. Like, it's a good solid hard hat for that kind of work. And I wore this thing for the next 2 to 3 years of my career. This hard hat was on my head one time when I almost died on a job site. I say that, maybe that's a little bit dramatic, but I was wearing this hard hat, and my boss and I we were drilling footings for a concrete pad. And I was his ground laborer, and he was operating the Bobcat with the auger on it. And one of the things we had to do was mount the bit to the auger. So how we did that in those days was somebody would hold the bit up on the ground and they would steady it. And then the Bobcat operator would drive in and drop the drive shaft into the top of the bit. Then the ground operator would put a pin through it and you're good to go. Normally it went off without a problem. Normally it wasn't an issue, except that this particular day, the auger drive wasn't properly mounted to the attachment plate on the Bobcat. So I'm standing there holding the bit. My boss is coming towards me with the skid steer, or the Bobcat. He starts lowering the drive shaft into the top of the bit. And as it touched, the weight shifted on the attachment plate and caused it to fall loose. Now we're talking about maybe 1,000-pound chunk of metal coming loose that was over my head, coming loose. It hit me right in the hat, pushed me back, and luckily swung on the hydraulic hoses and broke them, swung back towards the machine, and it didn't hit me. That was the only real close call I had in this hard hat, but one of these scratches, I don't know which one, but one of them was from that auger drive hitting my helmet as it knocked me back out of the way. But this represented sort of the beginning of the acceleration of my landscaping career. You know, my landscaping career started long before, but it was when I was working for that landscape construction company that I really started to love it. You know, I started to get to operate machinery, and I started to get to build things that were really interesting and stack rocks and do stuff that just lit me up in a way that tree care never really did. I loved tree care. I enjoyed it. It was so much fun, but I wasn't passionate about it the way I was the landscape construction. And this kick-started the next phase of my career. This hard hat was on my head for that next phase. But, you know, as the years went on, I worked for a couple of years for that company, and I was finally in my last year of my apprenticeship, and I thought there's still more to this industry that I haven't seen yet. You know, there's still the whole turf care and property maintenance side of things that I haven't seen yet, haven't experienced yet. And before I was out of school, I wanted to go and explore what more the industry had to offer. So I quit that job and I went to work at a golf course, and that was when I got this hard hat. See, it's exactly the same as the other hard hat. I had to wear a hard hat at the golf course because obviously there's golf balls flying everywhere, and it's got dangerous. It was actually more dangerous at the golf course than sometimes when we were craning big timber beams around and stuff like that. So I had this hard hat, and I got this one because I didn't want to use my other one because it was white. And on the golf course, anytime somebody came around with a problem, they're looking for the guy in the white hard hat. And that was not me, and I didn't want to take on that stress. So I got a blue hard hat so that I would blend in with the laborers and everything would be good. I didn't have to wear this hard hat for very long. I only worked at that golf course for 2 seasons. And during that time, I actually started my own landscaping company on the side. It was like just a bit of a side hustle. But that was sort of the beginning of me branching into being a professional landscaper, you know, feeling like I actually knew what I was talking about. And I was working at the golf course because I was somebody who knew what I was doing, and I was leading groups of younger kids, and it was like I felt like I had almost made it in my career. Although I didn't have my journeyman certificate yet, I felt like I knew what I was doing. And that's why I started another landscape company. And that's where this particular hard hat comes in important. This one I put up on top because I never actually wore it. I mean, a couple times maybe, but this was the hard hat that was given to me by the guy at the dealership when I bought my very first chainsaw. And I bought that chainsaw the year that I started working at the golf course, when I started my little landscaping company. I jokingly say that when I started my landscaping company by accident. Because I was working at this golf course full time, it was paying my bills, it was doing what I needed it to do, but the hours were crazy. I worked 5:30 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. So I had tons of time in the afternoons and evenings to go do other projects. And what I found was people were asking me, hey, would you come prune this tree for me? Or hey, would you come do this little landscape project for me? And I was like, hey, why not? I've got time, I had a truck, I had a couple shovels, I had access to stuff from the golf course if I needed it, like we were good. So I just did that for a while, and then one day it occurred to me, I was like, holy crap, I have a landscape company. And it was just like totally by accident, you know, I started doing these side jobs and it turned into a little business. So, but this hard hat was significant because I got it when I was in that phase of life, and it was my first real legitimate business. It was the first time I ever put my phone number on the side of a truck so people could get a hold of me to ask me to do work, people I didn't know. And it was really, really important. But the thing was, I was still young, right? I was 20 or 21, and I didn't know as much as I thought I did. You know, at that age, how you think you know everything. I was no different. And it didn't take me long, 2 seasons into running my own business and working at this golf course, I started to realize that there was a lot more I could learn. There was a lot more I didn't know than I did know, and I realized I needed solid mentorship and I needed somewhere to go. And I started looking around at options, companies I could go work for, and I kept landing back on the company that I worked for when I had to wear this hard hat. And it was a great company to work for. We had some really good times, and I felt like I had grown a lot with them, and they had expanded significantly since I left. They had, not because I left, but since I left, they had expanded significantly and brought in a bunch more people, and they had journeyman carpenters on staff, and they had journeyman stonemasons on staff, and they had really rounded out their offerings of service. They had a professional excavator on staff. I had learned to run equipment, but just taught myself. I had never had somebody who really knew what they were doing, who could teach me the proper ways to run equipment. So I decided that, I left that company on fairly good terms, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to just go back and see if I can work for them. And I called them, and they were thrilled to have me back. And that's where this hard hat was significant, because I worked there for 3 more years. Well, I learned from these guys that were still there. I had my journeyman ticket at that point, so I was leading a crew, and we were doing some really awesome projects. We built like a water harvesting system, 12,000 gallon underground water harvesting system. I don't know what that equates to in liters, about 4 times that. Anyway, I'm not going to do math on camera. But I wore this hard hat during that time. I got this one because it was a little lighter, didn't have the foam padding. We weren't doing quite as much crazy big overhead stuff. This was more, I needed a bump cap for walking underneath the booms of machinery and stuff, or crawling in tight spaces or whatnot. But I got this one because it had the wide brim. And the wide brim was nice because when I wore it, it would cover my ears. And because I was outside for 10 to 12 hours a day in the hot sun, and I didn't particularly like putting sunscreen on above my eyes because it would drip in, and it was a pain. But this would keep the sun off my head, and it was white, so it didn't get too hot, and it was just nice. And if you look, the guys one time stole it and they wrote my nickname on Bigfoot. That eventually turned to Shamu, but I wouldn't let them write that on because I was a little self-conscious about my weight back then, and calling myself a whale just didn't sit well with my ego. But then my name was on it too on the front. You can kind of still see that a little bit. And there's a lot of fun memories and good times attached to this hard hat. There's a lot of scary times attached to this hard hat too, a lot of moments. Not quite as scary as when that auger drive fell off, but there was a lot of moments that were like, oh man, things could have gone really sideways. I remember one time we were doing this project, we were flying a big, I think it was a 10 by 10 square hand-hewn timber beam up for a pergola that we were building on the 2nd floor balcony of this house. It was a crazy situation. It was this backyard, there was a hill down one side, no access from the back, only from the front down this hill. And we had backed a semi-truck with a crane on the roof down this hill and around into the backyard. So there's this semi-truck parked there, took up the entire backyard. He had his outriggers out, he had the crane, and then the crane was able to reach actually over the house to the front yard where we had another truck with this big custom hand-hewn beam come in. And we put the straps on the beam out the front. We were communicating to the crane operator. He couldn't see us, so it was all radio communications. And we had this beam, I think it was like 16 feet long, big 10 by 10 thing, a massive piece of lumber or timber, flying up over this house into the backyard. And we set it down onto 2 posts that were like just positioned, and it looked like there was no way they were going to hold it, but our carpenter was really good. He knew exactly what he was doing. And it was just one of the most amazing experiences. I wish I had photos somewhere of that particular pic, but I was so focused on what was going on that I didn't actually take any pictures. But I was wearing that hard hat for times like that. You know, I was wearing that hard hat at the time we used a crane to lift a hot tub up and over a house. Not quite in as crazy of a situation as that, but there's a lot of fond memories and a lot of interestingness tied to this hard hat. But as things do, you know, I'm a guy that gets bored easily. You know, I get sick of doing the same thing too much, and by that point I had been landscaping for about 10 years, and I was getting a little bit bored, and the money was good but not great, and I had some friends that were out working in the oil field, and I had heard tales of the easy to come by money in the Albertan oil patch. And I thought, you know, I'm going to take a little bit of time away from landscaping, and I'm just going to go and explore this. I'm going to go hang out with my friends in the oil field. I started working on my apprenticeship very young. And I felt like that made me sort of skip over a part of my adolescence that I wished I hadn't. You know, I had never gone through a reckless, rebellious phase, so to speak, and I kind of wanted to explore that side of life. So I thought, I'm going to go move in with my friends. I'm going to get this job in the oil field that's going to be super easy, and we're just going to hang out and have fun and make money hand over fist without too much effort, and it's going to be glorious. And that's when I got this hard hat. And this particular hard hat represents one of the biggest, most turbulent, tumultuous phases of growth I've ever been through in my life. See, when I first started having to wear this hard hat, I was 22 years old, 23 years old, I can't actually remember. But I had just moved away from my hometown for the first time in my life. 500 kilometers away from my parents. I was living in this little badly modified mobile home with my buddy and his girlfriend and their infant daughter, and this other guy that actually turned out to be my buddy's girlfriend's other boyfriend, and nobody knew who. It was this crazy situation, and we would drink and party and carry on, and I was living this entirely different lifestyle that I'd ever known before. And I was learning to drive a semi-truck, which was something I wanted to do ever since I was a little kid, and I never really had an opportunity to. But here I was learning how, and I was driving oil field production waste. We were doing tank cleaning jobs in the production fields, and I would haul it from these remote little facilities deep in the bush down these roads that you can't even really call roads. Somebody had gone through the forest with a bulldozer and made a little path, and otherwise it was just clay and mud. And I had this 100,000-pound truck with 22 wheels that would slide around all over, and it was wild. And I've got like hundreds of stories. Like one time I was on a job and something went wrong with my truck, and I couldn't get the pump to build enough pressure or air pressure in the tank to push the fluid out of the tank properly at the plant. And I didn't know what to do. It was only like 3 or 4 weeks into my career up there, and I didn't know what to do. And it was cold. I think it was like minus 33 or 34. Like, it was really cold that night. And it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm at this production facility with no idea what to do, and nobody's answering their phone when I called for help. And I ended up getting like really bad frostbite in my fingers and sleeping out in the truck for the first time, and it was just chaos. It was total chaos. There's another time I was wearing this hard hat when I was driving the same massive truck down this hill that we used to call the ski hill. And it was called the ski hill because you couldn't really drive down the hill. It was just muddy clay hill, and it was so steep you didn't have a hope of stopping. And all the drivers knew if you touched the brakes on that hill, you were going to lose your steering, and then you were going to end up going off the cliff on one side of the hill, and it was just not a good situation. So I remember going down that ski hill for the very first time wearing this hard hat and learning what it felt like to have 100,000 pounds of semi-truck sliding that's only partially under your control when there's a big cliff right in front of you. And I learned what it felt like to have a tractor come and attach onto the front of your truck and drag you back up a hill while I was wearing this hard hat. And so many different stories that happened in my life while I was wearing this hard hat. It's just so fascinating. But again, life moves on, and I outgrew it after about 3 years. I finally got to a place in life where I I was super depressed. I was not having a very good time anymore. I was making lots of money, but it didn't even matter because the lifestyle sucked so bad. Everybody around me was miserable. It was no fun anymore, and I decided I had to get out. And I had moved back to my hometown of Calgary, and I had started a little landscaping company, and I did that for a little while. And after my first summer of moderate success, but ultimately tons of hard work and very little payoff, I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And one day I was shoveling gravel all by myself. It was hot. It was like maybe almost 30 degrees, hot, sunny day. I'm sweating like crazy, shoveling gravel, and the second dump truck load showed up and dumped it. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And that night I came home and I was like, I can't landscape for the rest of my life. I can't keep doing this. This is going to kill me. This is just, it's miserable. I hate it. It's not making me very much money. I've got to do something else. I want a regular job. And for the first time in a long time in my life, I decided I wanted a regular job where I could go to the same place every day and work the same hours, doing the same thing, and something I never thought I would have ever said in my life. So I got to thinking, and I realized, like, my mom's husband, my stepdad, was a power engineer, and he's a building operator, and he really enjoys it. And I've always liked mechanical systems and operations and things like that, and I thought, hey, that could be interesting. So I did a little research. I found out what it took to become a building operator and a power engineer, and I enrolled in school, and that's when I got this hard hat. This was the hard hat I wore while I was attending SAIT, which is the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, working on my 5th class power engineering ticket. And I had to wear this hat because for half the class was theory in the classroom, learning about everything, and then half the class was actually operating a building. They had a lab set up where they had all different kinds of boilers and all different kinds of heat exchangers and chillers and water softeners and all of the systems that you find in a regular large-scale commercial building. And we spent 4 hours 2 nights a week operating this mock building, and everything worked. You know, the boilers actually fired, we actually boiled water, we actually ran steam, we did all that kind of stuff. And the whole time I had to wear this hard hat with these earmuffs because it's crazy loud in a boiler room when it's all super densely packed like it was in that particular lab. And this marked a really interesting phase of my life, because a couple weeks after I enrolled in the power engineering program, a couple weeks after I spent a whole pile of money I didn't have on tuition for a course I didn't even know if I was going to like, I realized I didn't like it. I realized very quickly why I was not the kind of person who wanted a regular job to go to day after day, week after week, in the same building with the same people at the same place. I realized how quickly I was going to get bored stiff. And then I became quite miserable. Then I started to realize that either I was going to have to continue to pursue landscaping, or I was going to have to go back to school for something more serious. I was going to have to build a brand new career. And that was when I started to kind of slip into a depression. But luckily, it was that depression that turned me into a speaker, that put me on the path towards where I am today. And so many amazing things in my life came out of that depression. But this was the hard hat that I was wearing in the phase of my life when that started to come. And this was the last hard hat I've had to wear. Because since then, I've grown my business to a point where I have other people that do the jobs that need hard hats. And I've grown myself to a point where I don't have to work so much in my landscaping business. And I've grown as a person to the point where I'm learning more about what I want out of life. And I've learned that a lot of what I want out of life requires having a job that doesn't need you to wear a hard hat. It requires a job that makes me think and do the things that use my knowledge instead of my muscles, and use my insight into the world, and my ability as a speaker, and my ability as a coordinator and a project manager, instead of my ability to haul rocks and build things and things like that. And of course, there's a part of me that will always do that stuff. I'll never stop landscaping entirely. I'll always do the odd little project here because I love it. I enjoy it. It was my first real passion, and I spent 16 years of my life building that career and working towards it, and there's so much good that came out of it. But this was the hard hat I was wearing when I started to make the transition out. And I still worked in landscaping for 2 years after I stopped having to wear this hard hat, but this was the last hard hat I had to own. And I won't say it's going to be the last hard hat I ever have to own, because I'm sure at some point in life I will need a hard hat again for some reason. They're too significant of a thing in my life to totally go away, but this is the last one that represents a phase of life where I was still letting life happen to me. This was the last hard hat I was wearing when I was going through life by accident. And it was this hard hat that I was having to wear when I started to learn to take control of my life and to take control of my destiny and to start working towards the things that I wanted. And it was the shifting point, and it was the turning point that really put me on the path to being who I am today. It's so cool for me to look back on all the hard hats that I've had to wear over the years, and it's so cool for me to think about all the stories that each of those hard hats holds. And that's one of the cool things, is I want to make this into a series. I want to do this kind of video, and what I'm going to do is every now and then, maybe once, twice, who knows, a week, I'm going to just set up the camera and I'm going to grab one of these hard hats. I'm going to tell some stories that happened while I was wearing that hard hat, because each one of those stories has, or each one of those hard hats has hundreds of stories that they could tell, and they have hundreds of stories that helped me become the person I am today and helped me learn many of the things that I know today. And I feel like this is just a really, really fun way to explore some of those stories and to remind me of some of those stories, because there's things that happened while I was wearing those hard hats that I've forgotten about. And just the simple act of feeling them and looking at them and touching them and putting them on my head again and experiencing them again puts me back in that mindset from that phase of life, and that helps me remember some of those stories. So I know there's some really cool stuff that's going to come out, and I'm excited about this series. I really am. It's totally different than anything I've ever done, but I think it's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to give you kind of a neat insight into where I came from and who I am and how I've come to be the person I am today. If you've stuck with me this long, thank you so much. Go and give this video a share or a like, or tell your friends. It really, really does help me get the word out to more people and get more subscribers, and ultimately more people that I can help with my mental health speaking and all that kind of fun stuff. But if you're with me this long, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I totally love the fact that even though we're in this weird time in the world where we can't physically be together so much, that I can just turn on a camera and talk directly to you from across the world. That's so cool. And it's so meaningful, and I'm so glad that you choose to be here and spend your valuable time listening to me tell stories about my crazy life. So thank you so much for watching. I will speak to you again very soon.